Welcome to NC Tweener Talks, powered by NC Idea, a weekly podcast by builders for builders, where we explore the startup journey from the idea to the exit and all the lessons in between, with an exclusive focus on founders from North Carolina. Now, here's your host, serial founder and general partner of the NC Tweener Fund, Scot Wingo.
First, a huge thank you to our gold sponsors. Today's Tweener Talks is sponsored by EisnerAmper. As one of the world's largest business consulting firms, EisnerAmper brings specialized industry knowledge to the tech sector with tailored solutions in accounting, tax, advisory, and outsourcing. Explore how our technology practice can drive your company forward. We'd also like to recognize our silver sponsors. Today, we are featuring Bank of America. Bank of America's transformative tech group provides the stability and scalability that tech companies need to rapidly grow today and into the future. Thank you again to all of our sponsors for supporting Triangle Tweener Talks and the entire Triangle startup community. It takes an ecosystem to build a thriving community, and sponsors like these are very valuable, and they contribute their time and also help sponsor things like the Triangle Tweener Talks and Triangle Tweener Times. Thank you. Welcome to this episode of North Carolina Tweener Talks. Today we have a live recording of a talk given by our very own Robbie Allen at our June 10th Tweener Club meetup held in Research Triangle Park. When he is not helping me run Tweener Fund as a general partner, Robbie has a AI consulting firm called Automated Consulting Group. And he is a solopreneuring this with some help from friends and building and deploying agents at a very large scale in production. So he shared 3 lessons from that experience over the last 60 days from when we had our last Tweener Claw meeting. He goes into a ton of detail with real world examples of why he is doing this in the talk. But just to give you an idea of what his 3 big learnings are. Number 1, build skills that build skills. That kind of sounds like this concept called recursive learning. Let's see if he mentions those words. Then number 2, agents monitoring agents. And then number 3, LLMs that check the work of other LLMs. So this is all from a practitioner who's building live in the field with real data, real customers, and how he's hardening these systems and making them production ready and deterministic. So taking non-deterministic systems and making them feel and act deterministic is tricky, and Robbie is way out on the cutting edge of that. So I learned a ton from this one, and I hope you do as well.
Warm claw welcome. Go ahead and take that one, or? Oh. All right. Hello, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces. So I'm Robbie Allen, the managing director of the Automated Consulting Group. We do AI strategy and development for typically mid-market companies. So I would describe that as companies with 30 million in revenue up to $1 billion in revenue. But the key is typically that they don't have a CTO already. Those are companies that have resources but woke up one day and said, oh crap, AI's happening and we don't have a team internally to figure it out, so they need outside help, and that's where we come in. And so been doing that for the last 1.5 years, working with a couple dozen companies locally. You probably heard of some of them, RTI, Fleet Feet, some of the large law firms. And so it's been fascinating because I've got to see on the front lines with a lot of these companies what's actually happening inside of reasonably large companies as it relates to AI. And the short of it is, it's almost nothing like what you read about in the popular press. You know, it's in fact, I spend a lot of my time trying to calm the fears of executives across the triangle that have read the latest article, and literally in one day you'll read an article about how AI is causing all of these layoffs across all these companies, and then also AI is not delivering on all the promise and all the pilots are failing. And so I don't know exactly how both of those are true, but that's what the media portrays, as well as, you know, companies that are deploying hundreds of agents and they're running their company off of agents. And I just don't think any of that's true. And mostly through my own experience, but then also what I'm seeing inside of other companies. And so anyway, all that to say, had a lot of experience with this over the last year. A lot of the companies that I work with are Microsoft shops because, again, stable, largish companies without a tech team, and those tend to gravitate toward Microsoft because that's the easy thing that the executive won't get fired for adopting. And so I'm working with many of those with Copilot, and it's fascinating just to try to get many of those executives to use things like OpenClaw or some variation of that, and doing that inside of the Copilot environment. And so that's the challenge that I've been trying to help many of these executives overcome, because Copilot does have an agent environment. It's way more complicated than it needs to be. Microsoft had a head start. They had 6 months early access to all of the OpenAI models. That's what their early $1 billion investment in OpenAI got them, and they still have not kept up. And even when things like Claude Cowork became very popular and Microsoft came out with an announcement, all right, we're going to do a Cowork of our own. We're going to call it Copilot Cowork. And they made a big announcement about that. I don't know, it was a few months ago, much like they just announced the Microsoft Scout announcement. That's why I'm pretty skeptical of that, because has anyone in here used Copilot Cowork? There would at most be a couple hands, because you got to be a part of the Frontier program with Microsoft, which is generally only available to the large enterprises. And then I've also used it and just like floored that they would turn something like Claude Cowork, which is actually a pretty good tool, into their version of that, which is not a very good tool. And so now it's funny, Microsoft's also announcing their version of OpenClaw. Again, also you have to be a part of the Frontier program to get access to it. It is not GA this month. It's only available to the enterprises. And if it's anything like their Cowork variant, it won't be available even in 3 months. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know how this turned into a Microsoft rant, but I just needed to vent a little bit, so bear with me. I'm going to just talk about 3 things. Again, I wasn't sure what to cover with this crowd. I give lots of talks on AI, and the skill set ranges from the people have not ever used a prompt before to they're trying to deploy agents. So 3 quick things. And I'm going to go kind of meta, and I don't know how that developed. It was just when I started thinking of these 3 things, they turned out to be more meta, and I'm not talking about the company in nature. And so the first that I'm often talking to companies right now about is skill building. And I'm not talking about the human skills, of course, I'm talking about the AI skills. This is still relatively unadopted inside of a lot of companies in terms of figuring out how to leverage skills. And the way that I think about it in terms of my own build out, and so I have roughly 25 agents that I use, that run every day for me. And this is why I know these companies that talk about having hundreds or thousands of agents deployed are all full of shit, is because the 25 I have are almost a full-time job just to keep them running and not failing all the time, which I'll talk more about in a minute. But as a part of the process of really kind of leveraging AI to the fullest extent, you really have to start building skills. And this isn't something that everybody's done. It sounds like I'm sure many of you have. But the way that I think about it is essentially trying to take what I do as a human and map that into something that I can replicate inside of AI. And sure, I can build custom software to kind of try to do those things. But what I find is if I take the effort to package up and build a skill out of it, I can reuse that, and it's very comparable for those of you that are programmers, where you build a package or you build some sort of module that you can then reference later when you're building something else. And so skills just are reusable packages of functionality that can incorporate everything from, it could just be a straightforward prompt, to it's actually a prompt plus some tools that are going to be used behind the scenes to do things. And so one example that I have is I'm a big proponent of recording meetings and using AI note takers. Why? Because meeting transcripts are going to be, I call it the sawdust of business today. In the future, especially as we get closer to superhuman intelligence, companies are going to quickly run out of data to feed AI, or the data that they have, the AI is not going to know exactly what that data means. And so companies will need to be able to translate, this data means this. Here's the business logic around my data. And so where are they going to get that? Is it in the documentation that they have inside the companies? Maybe they have some of that, but in practice, that's hard to come by. So where else is company data used and referenced? Well, it's referenced in just about every meeting that the company has. And so if companies would do the simple task of recording their meetings, they now are starting to collect all of this data related to business logic and how they think about and talk about their data. So anyway, I do a lot with trying to record meetings. And so I had this whole process. I use Otter as my AI note taker. None of them really matter to me in terms of the feature set, whether you use Fathom or any of the others, because I just keep the raw transcript. I don't even care about whatever summarized transcript that they give me. I can go generate that myself out of Claude code or whatever I'm using. What I want is the raw transcript, because now I'm having this repository of information related to exactly what was talked about in the meeting. So I started collecting all these, and I'd have more and more of these meeting transcripts, and sure, I would ask for summaries and things like that, but then I got to thinking, all the action items related to the meeting are captured in the discussion we had in the transcript. And so why don't I first write a skill that'll go out and periodically check Otter to see, are there any new meetings that I've just had? If so, download the transcript. Then I have another skill that'll go out and pull out, scan all of the meeting transcripts and identify the action items out of those meetings. And then now I have an end of week skill that'll go through and check to see, okay, across all of the meetings that I had and all the action items, what is it that still needs to be executed on? What have I not accomplished today, right? And so my thought process was like, what's a process that I go through? And then now systematically start building skills to do aspects of that process. So the way I think about it is like, what are your human skills, and start mapping that into AI skills. And that's a good way to go about it. Now, inside of companies, I do think this is probably one of the biggest attack vectors that we're gonna have to be careful of in the future. In fact, this is when I talk to company boards, they'll go off and do a search and they'll come back and say, well, what are we gonna do about skills? Yeah, it's a challenge because just as it was mentioned earlier, you can download a skill from a marketplace, and if you just kind of use it as is, who knows what's in that skill? Like what kind of prompt was used, what kind of tools are used, and it's kind of an open ticket just to have somebody run something in your environment without you knowing about it. So it's not like skills are foolproof. In fact, you can get into a lot of trouble, and this will be one of the big security questions that we ponder in the coming years is how do we properly assess skills and secure them, especially if you're going to deploy them in any sort of kind of corporate environment. Okay, next is, so that was skills building skills. This is agents watching agents. And so as I mentioned, I have 25-ish, it might be closer to 30 now, agents that I've built for myself that do a variety of things. I've already talked about some of them, right? It's checking to see, has there been any new, have I had any more meetings? And then processing those meetings and doing all this stuff with meetings. It's various kind of things helping me either run my business or helping me kind of monitor things that I want to keep an eye on. And again, as I started building this out, I would go in and check some of the agents when I had 5 or 6 of them. I was like, oh, that one failed. I didn't even know about it. It's like that one hasn't been running for the last 2 days. And I was like, okay, there's a problem here. And I'm going to have to figure out and keep track of this. And this is something I often talk about, that while AI development costs have gone down significantly, that is, it's so much cheaper to build stuff, support and maintenance still cost the same. You still have to support and maintain. And if anything, it maybe has gone up because AI solutions tend to be more brittle because they're non-deterministic, meaning that they can take different paths that you didn't anticipate. And so in general, support and maintenance is still a thing. You can't just build stuff and expect it's going to run without watching it. And so with my 25 agents, I was like, I need to build a monitor agent that's going to go in and keep an eye on my agents because I need to know if they're not working right. Because I built these things, I'm expecting they're running. And is that even true? So what I've seen over the last 6 months is any given day, 3 to 5 of my agents will have experienced some sort of problem, right? And this could be, it just happened this morning, queries an API that it relies on and the API is unavailable. And so that agent crapped out. It wasn't able to continue running. And of course, you put in retries and things like that, but there's times in which it's just not able to do things. Or there's an agent that relied on another agent. And that first agent wasn't able to do its thing, and that caused a cascading effect of failures. or there's a hiccup in the network, or there's just a bunch of different ways that these things can go off the rails, or just experience something that you didn't initially plan for or code for, and now the agent's failing. And so what I've seen is 3 to 4 of these out of 25 are failing on a regular basis. And again, it's not the same 3 or 4. These rotate, these vary. And so the idea that you're going to create 1,000 agents and have them run in an environment, I'd love to see it. If anybody's got that, please see me afterward, because I want to know how the heck you're able to pull that off without having a support team that's keeping an eye on these things on a regular basis. Now again, I'm not talking about simple things where it's just like a one trick pony that's doing something that's really straightforward and easy, that there's no potential failures. I'm talking about agents that are LLM based in some way, they're doing something interesting. Those have lots of failure scenarios now. So in general, if you're starting to go down the path of building out an agent infrastructure, plan on a good way to monitor it. That means also when you're building the agents that you're instructing it and you're creating them in such a way that they're actually going to produce useful log output as they run. Because the only way to know that if they're failing is generally if it can go in and detect something in the log files, or it didn't perform some action. You need to be able to understand that. And so when you're building your agent, make sure that it's outputting plenty of log information, debugging it. You can have it rotate, you can have it over-generate log information and then just have it rotate periodically. So it's not like you're taking up space on your hard drive that you can't get back. But in general, be careful with agents. Make sure that you're monitoring them on a regular basis. By the way, this is just a signal that we're super early in this whole cycle, right? Infrastructure is just not there for agents. These are the things when it comes to monitoring and management. I started my career in enterprise management, that is building software that monitored software. These things always come last. Like no one out of the gate thinks, oh, I want to go build a cool piece of software, and when I build it, I'm going to build all the metrics and tooling to monitor it. No, they don't think that way. It's kind of, you wait until the thing becomes successful, and then you say, oh, I guess we need to make sure that people can monitor this thing. And so this is just kind of the state of where we're at. The infrastructure for managing agents and keeping track of them is just not in a very good state now. But this is going to change. In the next year, this may not even be an issue. Maybe there'll be better infrastructure that automatically kind of handles and takes care of this. I question if that'll be the case, but in general, for now, you have to have something to help you monitor your agents.
Hey, Robbie, why are they flopping over? What's the root cause?
Yeah, like I said, it's a variety of things. It's querying an API that's not available. Maybe in some cases I'm scraping LinkedIn, and it's like going out and trying to retrieve something out of LinkedIn, and like LinkedIn's not playing nice that day. Or it could be in like a LinkedIn example, they changed the way the page is output, and now the agent's just going to fail because it's not able to get the information it thought it could get before. So there's just a bunch of different ways that these things can break. Okay, and then the last thing is LLMs that check LLMs. And so one of the things that I've really become particular on the last, I would say, month is, and I like this before, so I used to use, there's a variety of these out there called LLM councils. And what this is, if you're a ChatGPT person, I'm talking kind of coding harnesses and everything else. If you're using the web and you're a big ChatGPT person, or you're a big Claude AI person, or Gemini or Perplexity, there's tools called LLM councils where you can go and put in your prompt, and it actually will query multiple LLMs. Then you could compile all the results and have a leader, which it's often called, then take the results from all of those LLMs and then tell you what was kind of the consensus across all the LLMs, right? And so I used to use that, not for every query, I would still have my favorite, but for things that I was really wanting to get a lot of horsepower behind the answer, I would use one of these LLM councils. And I found it very useful. To me, the analogy is, imagine you have a hard physics problem. And I came to you and I said, all right, you can have either Einstein help you with this physics problem, or Feynman help you with this physics problem. Or you can have both. Which would you take? For me, I'd say, well, if I can have both, I'll take both. And that's kind of what we have with LLMs. Like, there's no reason why you only can use one. Obviously, if you're just paying for one, that's a reason. But what I'm suggesting, even to a lot of companies, which tend to be like, we're going to pick our LLM and we're going to have the one, I'm not sure that's going to be the long-term approach. I'm much more a believer in a multi-LLM strategy there's no reason why you can only have the one. I mean, there are some things that you have to do around your context and making sure that your whatever LLM is connected to your data sources, and that's important. But I've just seen way too much value in having LLMs check each other to not have a multi-LLM strategy. And so what does that mean? Well, whether I'm coding, especially for coding, but even doing like strategy work or any kind of complex analysis, whatever your LLM of choice is, and mine tends to be Claude Code. By the way, I have 24 hours of Fable 5 usage, and it's easily double the price of 4.8. I mean, maybe it's more. It's been a little painful the last 24 hours in terms of the cost, but I would say still, my LLM of choice is Claude, but Codex is right behind it, and Codex is 5.5 so much faster. It's hard not to like it. But what I'll do is I'll use Claude for most of my interactions. And then I'll use a skill that I created called Codex Opinion that essentially takes the context of all the stuff I've been working on in my context history and passes it to Codex and asks Codex's opinion on what Claude just told me. And it's been fascinating. Over the last month, it's fascinating and a little bit concerning because I'll run Codex Opinion on a given task and it always comes back with something. You missed this. Here's 3 points that you didn't consider. This was just wrong. And I was like, wow, okay, well, Claude missed that. And so I'll fix it, update the output. All right, run Codex Opinion again. It finds more things. Again. And so then I was like, whoa, maybe I should I'll create one called Gemini Opinion. And sometimes I'll ask Gemini for its opinion. Guess what? It finds stuff too. And so this happens very consistently. And so then when I was in Codex, of course, I built a Claude opinion, and it does the same thing. So every time, they will nitpick the heck out of each other and find important things. Occasionally it'll be like, yeah, nothing major was found. But in general, especially if it's a complex thing where you have, a fairly significant data set that you're looking at or analyzing, or transcripts or whatever you're looking at, it's going to find something. And so it's happened enough, I'm like, well, anything important, I'm going to ask another LLM for its opinion on the output because it's just finding too many holes. And again, this is with using the latest models, right? And sometimes there are holes in the analysis. Sometimes they're just, a different way of looking at things. Or, oftentimes Codex wants to emphasize or de-emphasize certain things that Claude said. And so then it's kind of, well, which one do I agree with? Which side would I rather go? But I'm thankful to have the decision to make. And so in general, big fan of LLMs checking other LLMs. I think this is going to be a standard approach in the future. Again, I'm not exactly sure how that works out. For me, it's using skills to do this checking. And again, it'll depend on how expensive this gets. Obviously, you're kind of doubling your cost. If you're worried about cost, this isn't a way to reduce your cost. It's going to increase it. But you could also use an open weight model as like your checker. I did create a skill called LLM Council that will actually go through, say I'm working in before it was Opus, it will go through Sonnet, Gemini, and Codex, all three of them, and give each of them the context, and then pick a leader, which might be Opus, to then synthesize all of that back with the final response. And again, the quality output is better, as you might think it would be. Again, Einstein and Feynman working together, it's a better output. And so anyway, that's that tip. Okay, so that's all I have.
Triangle Tweener Talks is hosted by Scott Wingo, presented and produced by Triangle Tweener Fund, with creative assets and design support from our friends at Walk West. That's it for today's episode. A big thank you to our guests, sponsors, and the team that makes this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves the startup stories coming out of the Triangle. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time on Triangle Tweener Talks.